Good afternoon. On the way down here, I was thinking a little bit about what to say and thought about inspiration. How many of you guys, find that these days it's much harder to find inspiration from your elected officials, right? Those of you who watched the debate last night, what is it that President Obama is actually promising you that he's going to build in the next 4 years? What is it that Mitt Romney is promising you that he's going to build in the next 4 years? Neither one of them really had anything to say. For me personally, I found a lot of inspiration early on from the Space Shuttle program. I don't know if you guys followed it this year, but they retired the Space Shuttle program. And I live in Washington, D.C., and they actually brought the 747 pretty low. And those of us who cared a lot about this got onto the rooftop of the building that we could find, and we actually stood in awe as this masterpiece of U.S. engineering and U.S. innovation took its final landing. And so for those of you who care a lot about inspiration, you think about these things, and you think, what responsibility do our elected officials have to inspire us, right? And for many of you, when you hear the word inspiration, it probably follows that you think about innovation, right? I, for one, don't actually think about innovation. I think a lot more about deployment, right? Because I'm so sick and tired of all these things that are going to happen next year that never happens, right? I mean, 2 decades later, it's still hard to find out where the smart grid is actually going. I'm sure that all of you have heard of the game changer that is natural gas, right? Not if you've heard about natural gas, right? Absolutely. So now you are sitting in a world where you have an electric utility company. If you're here, you're in Austin Energy's territory. If you're in Washington, D.C., you're in a third world grid called PEPCO. In other places, you're in other places, right? What happens with your relationship with the utility company is that you get a bill every month, right? That bill invariably is higher than you expected because they don't give you real-time feedback as you're using the electricity, right? And that power comes from where, right? It comes from coal, it comes from wind, it comes from solar. Whatever it is that the mix is there, it comes from some central location. It comes through long wire distances, through transmission lines, to your home, right? So now I tell you, we are going to shift 77,000 megawatts of coal within the next 5 years to natural gas. How many people are inspired? Right? So what would inspire you? Let me give you a scenario, right? So I made my money in the solar industry. So I come to you and I say, I can come to your house. I will give you the power to put renewable energy, distributed energy on your roof or in your yard, geothermal, whatever it is that you decide that you want to do. You now have the destiny to reduce the cost of your own energy bills and generate power locally, providing jobs locally to local electricians, local roofers, local folks in your neighborhood. Further, I now have real-time metering on that solar system, so you can brag to anybody else that you see on the street that look at my iPhone shows me how much power I'm generating at a moment's notice and how much usage I have from my house. And oh, by the way, my meter is now running backwards, right? That's pretty cool. It's something that people are like, wow, I would go to a community meeting to actually come together to see how I might be able to make that happen, right? That is the difference between a natural gas future and a local energy future, right? That's inspirational. But we don't have inspiration today. What we have is a whole bunch of people who are like titans at the gate, right? The coal industry versus the natural gas industry versus the nuclear industry. How many people care? Very few of us, right? And that's the challenge. And so where we are today is we're sitting here at a point where we're drilling a lot of oil, right? If I said to you, we're going to get there by drilling a ton of oil, I think Mitt Romney promised to double the number of permits on public lands last night, or President Obama says, we're going to help you by doubling the CAFE standards. To me, that's not inspirational. That's just like energy jargon. That's regulatory, right? my feeling personally is that, if when you look at this business, this is the largest wealth creation opportunity on the planet, right? If you thought that the web was the largest wealth creation opportunity of the 90s, and that the mobile phone was the largest wealth creation opportunity of the last decade, I will say to you that clean energy and energy efficiency is by far the largest wealth creation opportunity of this decade. So what I would suggest to you is that as we move through this process of figuring out what it is that we need to do to get to unlocking this wealth creation opportunity, the question I'd ask yourself is, 20 years from now, what are you willing to stand on the roof of your building to watch go by, right? What is it that you're willing to, like, I actually had to cancel meetings, go onto the roof of my building to watch the Space Shuttle Discovery go by, right? What I would submit to you is that until you can answer that question, until a politician can help you answer that question, we're not going to get to the energy future. Thank you.
Let me tell you about a big mistake I made about Austin, Texas once. I was at a Senate hearing, and we had a witness, and the witness was a little bit thick-headed and wouldn't tell us anything that was very interesting and wouldn't answer any questions. And finally, in exasperation, I said to him, you know something, I was in Austin, Texas once, and I saw a bumper sticker from a bar called Oat Willie's. And I said, just stay with me here, I said, that bumper sticker said, onward through the fog. You know what, you ought to wear that bumper sticker, my friend. And so, I got him. And then I walked out, and at the end of the day, I checked my emails, and someone from Austin, Texas had been watching C-SPAN and said, dear Mr. Senator, Oat Willie's is not a bar. It's a drug paraphernalia shop in Austin, Texas. So, I'm not going to quote Onward Through the Fog Day. Let me tell you this. This issue of being inspired. I'm from the state of North Dakota, up near Garrison Keillor's area, and here's what Garrison Keillor said. Thank you, we were raised by people who taught us that life is an enormous struggle. And if at some moment you should find yourself really very happy, be patient. It'll pass. Let me tell you what I am inspired by. So we now have a 2-year battery. Now that makes all the difference, right, for automobiles, because I'm a big fan of electric vehicles. So we have a 2-year battery. It is on a vehicle the size of your SUV that is driving on the surface of Mars today as I speak. The name of this vehicle is called Curiosity. We put it on top of a rocket, and we shipped it off to Mars. It took 36 weeks to travel 350 million miles. It entered Mars at 13,000 miles an hour. We turned it around, and it landed at 1.5 miles an hour. It has 17 cameras. It has a jackhammer. It has a laser that'll cut your arm off. It's powered by a battery that will last 2 years. Now, the battery was a little expensive. It's a nuclear device. But isn't it interesting that we were able to ship a car to the surface of Mars that landed 1 minute late, 1 minute beyond the estimate. And it is the most sophisticated device that you can imagine, and it's going to travel the surface of that strange planet for 2 years. Now, I'm inspired by that. I'm inspired by the will to do it. I'm inspired by the technology. And my first job out of college when I got my MBA was working for a company on the Voyager project, which was a Mars project many, many years ago. But those things inspire me. And then I ask the question, if we can do these things that just take your breath away, why can't we do some more profound and less difficult things here on planet Earth? Why can't we do that? So let me talk just a bit about this issue of energy, because we live in a country that's a great place, and this economic engine called the United States of America runs on fuel. The question is, what kind of fuel? Where does it come from? How do we use it? What does it put up into the atmosphere? I'll talk about that just a bit. Now, the narrative as I grew up, and you grew up, has been about our energy source, this. Real men dig and drill. Real men dig and drill. Dig for coal, drill for oil. And if you happen to be one of those folks from a college town that drives a Volvo, drinks Chardonnay, wears a corduroy jacket with a little elbow patch, and has gatherings in your little living room to talk about things like solar or wind. You know, God bless you, but you'll never amount to much. We just hope you'll get out of the way. You know we've experienced that for a long, long time. Now, wind, solar, geothermal, biofuels, all of that, in my judgment, is very important in terms of sustainability and for energy security and for our country's security. Let me start at the top end of where we are at the moment. This issue of natural gas and oil, it's a big deal. It's transformational. It really is. My home state of North Dakota is producing so much oil. We have 2,000 drilling rigs drilling 1 well a month. That's 2,400 wells a year, and none of them are dry. We are producing 25% more oil right now than when the last presidential campaign started in this country. In 2007, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission warned that we were going to run out of natural gas, and we had to find a way to access natural gas from other parts of the world. That was 5 years ago. Now they say we have 100 years of natural gas. Now that is transformational, and no matter how you feel about energy sources, it is good news for our country because it makes us less dependent on foreign oil, and enough oil spills from the barrel overseas to fund terrorism threats that we have to deal with in this country. So that's transformational. But it is not the last word in energy. This country needs to have a will, just as we had a will to put a vehicle on the surface of Mars, to decide to do something about the fuel by which we transport ourselves. And I believe that if this country simply exhibits the will, we can do really important things. I was one of 3 senators that wrote the first bills that were mandates, and I'm all for mandates, by the way, in the right way, in the right areas. The mandate of a renewable fuel standard, saying our first mandate was you have to at least reach 7.5 billion gallons of renewable fuels. Well, guess what? That mandate was expanded very quickly to 36 billion gallons of renewable fuels. And the fact is, who would have guessed in a very few short years we would have displaced 10% of our oil needs for transportation with ethanol? We did. Why? Because we demanded it. My friend from Texas for many decades, Jim Hightower, once said the following: even a dead fish can go with the flow. So we can keep doing what we're doing, and in the short term we are a bit more secure in terms of energy and national security because of these finds in oil and natural gas. But that is not sustainable with respect to the needs that we have to reconcile energy use and the environment. And that's why I really believe that we ought to continue to press for a national electricity standard, continue to press forward on the 36 billion gallon renewable fuel standard, and decide that this future of ours is what we can make it. And if we're smart, and if we do it right, in my judgment, we can have a more secure, a safer, and a better environment with fuel use sources that we choose that strengthen this country for the long-term future. Thank you very much.